What do you think looks better? This? This? Or like this? Hi everyone, in this video we're going to be covering composition rules for shooting portraits, and we're going to be showing you how to do everything in our studio. Now before you start shooting, it's really important to select the right camera lens. If you're shooting standard portraits like headshots and use a lens with a shorter focal length like 35mm, our model's face is going to be distorted. The model's nose is going to appear bigger, they'll get chubby cheeks, and their whole face is just going to look a lot more rounder than it actually is. So for headshots, we recommend a lens with a focal length of around 85 to 135mm. You can now see how different portraits taken with a different focal lengths look. You be the judge. The portrait taken with a 35mm lens doesn't look great, and these focal lengths are primarily intended for full frame cameras. Now with smaller sensors, you can get away with portraits at lower focal lengths. For example, with the APS-C lens, which have a crop factor of 1.6, you can take a decent looking portrait on even a 50mm lens, which on this sensor is going to correspond to a focal length of around 80mm. However, the optical properties remain the same, so it's safer to stick with the focal length range that we already mentioned. Now that we've covered what lenses work best for portraits, let's work out how to do composition. Now there are two main types of compositions for portraits, central and then what's known as the golden ratio. Now let's start off with central composition. And as the name suggests, it implies that our subject is going to be somewhat like this right in the middle of our frame, kind of like how I am now. Now right off the bat, I want to tell you that central composition is not going to work well when we're shooting portraits in landscape orientation. Central composition works best when it interacts with the rest of the photo in some kind of way. And in this case, it's a good idea to look for perfect symmetry or an object that frames the subject in some kind of interesting way. Otherwise, central composition is going to look dull, boring, and it just doesn't catch the viewer's eye. Now, if you shoot portraits in portrait orientation, you don't have many more options, meaning that central composition is the correct and maybe actually even the only way to do it. The second composition type is the golden ratio. It's all around us in nature where you can find several examples of this. And in essence, it's a mathematical formula that uses ratios to define aesthetic balance for different lengths. But we're here to take pictures and not do any math. The ratio is roughly 1 to 3, so photographers simplify it by using a rule of thirds. Now each photo can be divided into a 3x3 grid. We then place our subject on one or the other side of this grid, and if we want some help while shooting, we can definitely view this grid on our camera, which is going to help make our composition with the rule of thirds a lot easier. It's also no coincidence that Zoner Photo Studio X has this grid when we crop, and it shows us exactly where these guidelines are. Now that we're familiar with the rule of thirds, we can now start putting our composition together in thirds, and let's go see how that's done. Now it's best if the main point of interest is in one of the 4 middle points. For example, the model's face. With the golden ratio, it's much easier to get away with not having anything else in the rest of the photo. Even so, the photo is going to be aesthetically pleasing. But it's not a bad thing if we add other objects to this space. This is going to make the photo a lot more interesting. Again, it's useful if the objects in that space somehow conform to the rule of thirds, and this makes the composition appear much more balanced. Now, it's not required, but generally speaking, it's great to have an object or perhaps even some kind of diagonal line in this area. Like with central composition, it looks good if the model has something around them to frame them because it's going to draw a lot more attention to them. Keep an eye out for the position of the model though. It doesn't look good if the model's gaze is going outside of the frame. Now it's really important to give your model the correct instructions, and that's why you should read the article, The Art of Directing a Photo Shoot. And you can find a link today in the video's description below, but now let's get back to portraits. Now, it's always a good idea to have some kind of safe zone when you're shooting your portraits, because if the frame is too close to the subject, the photo is just going to look cramped and it's not going to be pleasing at all. And so that's why it's better to shoot with some extra space, and then if necessary, just crop out the excess in Zoner Photo Studio X. Now, you can always crop, but you can never get back what is outside of the frame. Now, what about height? Of course, height plays a very important role in portrait photography too. It all depends on how you want the photo to look. You can shoot from above, from below, or at eye level. Most of the time, we're going to be shooting at eye level, which means that your camera is going to be placed at the same height as the model. And this composition inspires confidence and allows the viewer to best connect on some emotional level with the model. Shooting from above can evoke feelings of inferiority, so it's actually not used very often. And in general, I only shoot from above when the model is in a place where there are enough objects around the model to create some kind of interesting relationship or composition in their surroundings. Sometimes it's a good idea to use just slight elevation where you get just a little bit above eye level. I think this helps the model push their chin up a bit, eliminate the extremely unpopular double chin, and it makes the model actually look a little slimmer. Okay, and the last one is shooting below the model. Now this again is going to give the viewer the impression that the subject is actually more dominant than the viewer. So that's it for composition rules for portraits. I hope this was useful for you. Give us a thumbs up and don't forget to hit the subscribe bell so that you never miss another video. And as always, feel free to leave us what you think below. We like hearing what you think, and we even might make a video about it. Thanks, have a good one, see you in the next video. Ciao.